Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint Stormcast Eternals Lord Exorcist. The first colour we're going to use is Vallejo White. We use this for the inside of his cloak and the kind of swirly bits for the kind of ethereal part going into the top of his staff. We've also got quite a few little lightning bolts and different things like that about the miniature that you want to be painting with the white as well. Starting with this colour mainly because the inside of the cloak is white and you're going to be reaching past a lot of different parts of the miniature to try and get that white in there. So if you do this colour first, then when you come to do the other colours you won't be getting the white on them, try and reach past them. So with the white done, we're going to move on to Citadel Retributor Armour. I'm going to paint the majority of this Stormcast's armour. I ordinarily would have given him a spray of Retributor armour from the can, but I had run out at this point, so I just sprayed him black so I could do the video. Thankfully Retributor armour has pretty good coverage when you give it a good shake. So it's very easy to get one coat to cover whatever's beneath it. With those done, we're actually going to go on to Citadel Kantor Blue. Going to be doing the shoulder pads and the back of his cloak. So you can give them a nice smooth coat of that. Then we can move on. It's a really great looking cloak this once you start painting it up and you get all these ridges done. It does look really cool without too much effort. Now it's on to the Citadel Rakarth flesh. I'm going to use this to do the bit of scroll work hanging down from his side, and then you've got the little triangular bit of his robe on his back and these two large bits hanging down the front. There's also the skull hanging from his staff as well. You want to give that a coat of Rakarth flesh too. Next up is going to be Citadel Khorne Red. So we're going to be doing the leather for the book cover with this, and we're also going to be doing the kind of wrap for his staff as well. I'm going to give the bookmark a coat of it too, that's sound. Now we're going to do some Citadel Mephiston Red. I'm going to use this to paint up all the little gemstones. Now there's 3 on the top of this, 3 on the back of his neck, 1 on each side of the bottom of the staff too. So he is well jewelled up, this chap. Also going to drag the brush down the trim for these robe parts here. So you have the 2 red stripes down each side of this, ending in a little red W, and then you've got the trim on the back of his neck too. Next up is a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Silver. I'm going to use this to do a few of the little detail parts on it. Like the diamond on his chest and the little hooks here that are holding these things on. And a few little smaller details knocking about too. Now to stop this going into focus on the background there, I have changed the video setup now, so partway through this it will change around, as this was recorded some time ago, the early parts of this video. So I'm going to use Apothecary White Contrast. This is going to be to shade all of the areas of white on him, except for that little spirit chap who's getting sucked into his staff. I was very tempted to paint that up like one of the traps off Ghostbusters. Add a few little cables to it, but thought better of it. Still think that would be quite a fun thing to do though. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to use this to shade all of the gold. So that's all of his armour and all the gold parts on his staff. You can see how long ago this part was filmed by the Plague Marine with the flail there, who was up on a video, I think about 2 months ago now. Maybe a little bit longer. Sometimes I'll get partway through a miniature and won't want to finish it for some time. Now it's going to be Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I'm going to use this for the scroll work and the skull and these roby parts here too. Give these a good coat of that. Get it nicely shaded that we can build on later. Once you've got that done, we can move on to the next. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade. We're going to use this to shade all of the areas that we used the Kantor blue on. Now if you go into any of the details on the shoulders, that's not too bad. You can go over them very, very easily before we put the next shade on. We've got the hammer and the lightning on one shoulder as well. I haven't painted that yet. I'll do that a little bit later on once we've done the shades, because it tends to be the case where I'll get the shade over the hammer and the lightning bolts anyway, so I figured I may as well wait until I've done this shade on the shoulder pad, and I can paint the colours on in a moment. Next up we're going for Carrowbird Crimson, and we're using this on the leather wrap of the staff and also on the cover of the book and the bookmark too. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Druchii Violet. We're just going to add some shade to the red. So you've got to be really, really careful here and just sort of drag that along sideways across the red parts, so you just get that shade down the edges of the red without going onto the Rakarth flesh area. I'm just going to use this on the gems and a little bit of trim at the back there as well. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Technical Nighthorn Gloom. I'm going to use this to shade in the upper part of the spirit that's getting sucked into the kind of staff. If you want to see, you could paint this in a similar way to some of the Nighthorn's paint technique videos that I've put up so far. We're trying something a little bit different here. We're going to add a little bit of Citadel Technical Hexwraith Flame. I'm going to paint the bottom half of this spirit with this. We're just going to highlight that as we go along. Now we're going to return to the armour. We're going to use Citadel Retributor Armour. We're going to start reapplying colour to that. So when you're reapplying this, you want to be thinking about where the light is catching the miniature. You don't want to be reapplying the colour to the underside of any of the gold areas. You want to leave that shaded with the Agrax Earthshade. Just mainly applying this to the top surfaces and the sides that are going to be catching the light. Once you finish the Retributor armour, we're going to move on to Citadel Liberator Gold. So you want to be thinking about where this is going to be catching the light, mainly around top edges and on flat surfaces, picking out details like the nose and the mouth and the lips and things like that. If you look at the way light catches maybe gold statues or any kind of metallic statue, and just look at the way the light catches it, it's never always a smooth and even amount of colour to that, where it's reflecting and you get the lighter shades. You're just trying to have a little play about, see if you can get it looking similar to that. Now we're going to add some Vallejo Model Air Chrome to the Liberator Gold, and we're going to just do final highlights on the gold with that. And for that you're just going to be picking out all the little details, all the edges, all the trims and things like that, just so that they really stand out. Now the good thing about the Model Air Chrome is it's got tons of pigment in it. It does lighten it up quite a bit, and it means that those highlights will stand out and just give it that little bit of extra shine when you're looking at it from different angles. Now I'm going to use plain Vallejo White. I'm going to use this to put the white back onto the cloak, mainly on the crests of it. You want to leave the apothecary white in the recesses. We're also going to be adding the white to the lightning bolt shapes on his head and his waist here too, and also reapplying colour back to the pages of the book. So you want to make sure you get the edges of each page so you can see them from the front and the sides, and also colour in the pages on top, leaving some of that apothecary white visible there. Next up is Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to start reapplying the colour to the skull and also to his robes, the two bits down the front and the triangle at the back. And again, you want to be thinking about where the light is going to catch it and making sure that you highlight those areas and leave the shade in the areas where the recesses are. So if you look at the two kind of roby bits that are hanging down the front there, you've got some ridges where it overhangs slightly when it's coming down off his chest before it goes straight down in front of him. So you want to leave some of those bits shaded so it gives the effect of the shade underneath where it's hanging down from the armour. So you can see that there. We're now going to add a little bit of white to the Rakarth flesh. We're just going to highlight that again. Once more, you want to make sure that you're leaving the shade in the previous layer showing around this, so that you can get the highlights looking right, and it's not just a straight change from the initial one to the next colour to the next colour. Now we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. We're just going to start highlighting that one final time. Exactly the same as before, you want to leave the previous layers showing around it a little bit. Just highlighting the layers that are going to be catching the most light to make them stand out a little bit more. Now we're going to work on the skull, and the next colour we're going to use is Citadel Ushabti Bone. You're just going to be picking out the highlights and the details with that. Trying to get those teeth and the eyebrows and the cheekbones and the top of the nose and that kind of thing, just so you make the details really stand out. Next up, we're adding a little bit of white to the Ushabti bone, and we're just going to make that final highlight on the skull here. So once more, just picking out those details, making them really stand out. Near the ridges, and also a little bit on the top of the head, where that'll be catching the most light. Now we're going to use Citadel Deepkin Flesh. We're going to use this to colour in the Nighthaunt type fellow, or the soul, or the spirit, or what have you, that's getting sucked into the trap on the top of his staff. So here you want to be looking out for where the ridges are and the crests and things like that, and you're giving it a good coat, but you're leaving the Hexray Flame and the Nighthorn Gloom in all the recesses. So you really want to be picking out those ridges and those details to make them stand out with the Deepkin flesh. And with that complete, you're now going to use some Vallejo White or Citadel White or whatever white you're using. And you're just going to highlight the areas that you've put the Deepkin flesh on there to make them really stand out. You can pick out all those details and do all the little ridges and that kind of thing, just to make those white bits really show up and give it a bit more of a glow to it. Now going to go on to Citadel Mephiston Red. I'm going to start reapplying this to the trim of his robes. I'm not going to do the gems straight away, we're going to come back and do them all in one go. So we just stick to the robes for the time being, just pick out all that trim, get them so they're nicely highlighted and they stand out. Now we're going to use some Citadel Evil Sunz Scarlet. I'm going to highlight the Mephiston Red that we just put down. Again, like you did with the Rakarth flesh and the highlights from that, you want to be thinking about where the ridges are and colouring it in so that you're picking out those areas and adding the colour to the bits that are going to make it stand out a lot. And the final highlight we're doing to this red is using Citadel Squig Orange. Like we did the final highlight on the Rakarth flesh, you just want to be picking out the same kind of areas with this, and the top edges, some of that trim, just to make it stand out. Now it's the Citadel Khorne Red, and we're going to start working on the wrapping of the staff and also the red of the book, like the leather cover and the binding. So what you will be doing here is using the Khorne Red to fill in each of those segments on the staff. The actual segments kind of curve in, they're quite concave, so they've got a bit sticking out at the top and a bit sticking out at the bottom. But you want to give the whole thing a colour of Khorne Red, leaving the Carrowbird Crimson in the recesses. Then with the next layer, we are going to use Citadel Wazdakka Red, and we're going to pick out the top and the bottom of each of these segments, leaving some of the Khorne Red in the middle of them. So be very careful. I'm using the Citadel small layer brush here, because it's got a decent point on it. So you want to be getting the top and the bottom, as you can see me doing there. Once you've done it this way, you need to turn it a little bit so you can do the top and bottom from the next side and the next side and the next side, so you're getting those tops and bottoms done all the way around it. And once all that's highlighted, we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Pink Horror. I'm going to use this to do the final highlight. We're using the Army Painter Wargamer character brush here, and you're just going to do a final highlight on the top and the bottom, highlighting the areas that you've just put the Wazdakka Red. Just keep on this. It takes quite a while to do, but if you keep on it, the staff will look really, really good once you've finished. It takes that little bit of extra time and effort, but it does pay off once you've done it. Now we're going to go on to Vallejo White. I'm just going to pick out the little gem detail at the top here and the little gem detail on his head here. Being done in a slightly different way to how you'd usually do the gems. Now we're adding some Citadel Armour Blue to the Vallejo White. We're doing this because we are going to start highlighting this in the way which is the opposite to how you'd usually do lenses. So the bottom left hand half of this is going to be getting darker and darker until you've got the Ahriman blue highlight at the bottom left hand side. But it's not really a highlight because it's darker, but you'll understand what I mean as we go through. We're doing a crescent on the bottom left hand part of the circle, and they are going to be getting darker and darker until they are just pure Ahriman blue. So we're going to add another bit of blue to the previous mix and just do the little crescents there. And once more, we're adding some more Ahriman blue to the previous mix. We're just going to darken those crescents again. And finally, a bit of pure Ahriman blue, just to do the final thin highlight on those crescents. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo Black. We're going to be doing the cords which are holding the skull and the Stormcast's head on his banner there. We're also going to be using this to do the two little cords holding the skulls on either side of his waistband, and also to do all the gaps and joints in his armour. Like so. Now we're going to highlight the cords using Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey. I'm just going to give each of those a little quick touch of this colour, just to get a little bit of a highlight on there. You don't need anything too major. A little bit of highlight on each of them. Now I'm going to use Vallejo German Grey. I'm going to use this to highlight the gaps between the armour plates that we've just used the black on. Now Citadel Mephiston Red, we're going to start working on these gems. So there's lots and lots of small quick layers on these. You're mainly trying to get the crests and leaving a darker portion for each gemstone on the flat edges at the base of them. So the lighter parts are going to be the raised areas. If you happen to go onto any of the gold, it doesn't matter at any point, you can always touch that up once you've finished. You mainly want to be trying to highlight these pretty quickly. So you've got the little bit of squig orange. Again, you're just going to highlight the area you've just highlighted, trying to get the crests of those diamonds. And here a spot that I've missed the 3 on the back of his neck, so I'm just using a little bit of Mephiston Red to do the initial layer, then a little bit of Evil Sunz Scarlet. I'm going to finish off with a little bit of Squig Orange that we've just been using on everything else, just to touch them up, get them all up to the same layer. And then finally, we're just going to use a tiny little bit of Vallejo White, just to touch up those gemstones. You want to try and get either a line or a dotted line, sort of a line and a dot going down the tallest vertical edge of the gemstone. And get a few little dots, one dot in the top 2 segments where it's darkest, so towards the actual golden base that the gems are on. This bottom one is a bit tricky to get anything in there, so I just did a highlight along its edge. Now it's onto Kantor blue. I'm going to reapply colour to the shoulder pads and also to his cloak. Now I don't show any of the cloak getting done here because I'm working on the shoulder pads, but his cloak, you want to be leaving the Drakenhof Nightshade in all the recesses, and using the highlight colours and the Kantor blue on all the crests of those ridges on his cloak. So with the Kantor blue you want to be putting on a decent amount, leaving just a little bit of the shade in between those creases. And with this highlight we're adding Caledor Sky to the Kantor blue to lighten that up. We're going to start painting about 50% of the Kantor blue area. We're going to be painting that with this new highlight mix on all the crests, and this will help the crests stand out and make it look like they're catching the light. A little bit off camera there, sorry, but you can see what I'm doing from the top ones and the sides there. So for the next highlight we're going to add more Caledor Sky to the previous mix. On the shoulder pads you want to be getting a chunk of the wider part at the bottom highlighted. I always tend to go for kind of the bottom edge as getting the most highlight. It probably wouldn't, but it makes it stand out quite well. And then a thin highlight on that top edge which is nearest the head. Going to add more Caledor Sky to that and start giving that another highlight. This is pretty much just pure Caledor Sky. You could probably just do that if you wanted to. That just brings out all the highlights on the crests of that cloak. As you can see, it does make a difference just highlighting the crests. Now I'm going to put some little features onto his book. So we're going to start with a little bit of Mephiston Red, and then we are going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black. So all we're doing here is adding details to the book. I'm using the Mephiston Red to do an initial image on the page, and it's kind of like the meteorite with the two flames coming off it, like the two lightning bolts coming off it on the initial one, and then just roughly copying some of the symbols that are on the Stormcast Eternals scrolls and doing that on the one page. On the other side I'm just making a little image of a Liberator with his raised hammer. So this is the finished Lord Exorcist. Really happy with how he turned out. It's a great addition to the Stormcast Eternals. Also like his pose as well. I adjusted his head slightly before I put him together so he's looking up at the staff rather than straight ahead. I do think that's quite a nice little detail. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also think about subscribing to some of our other social media, linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, you can head to either our Ko-fi or our Patreon pages linked below. Thanks very much.